Welcome to the India Fintech Diaries, the only podcast focused exclusively on the Indian fintech market. I'm Elroy.
And I'm Hemant. In each episode, we dive into the latest trends, ideas, innovations, business models, and personalities that are shaping India's fintech landscape.
We also invite amazing guests who are innovators and industry players that are driving the change that is helping make financial services more modern, innovative, and inclusive in India. Come join us as we explore the changing landscape of fintech in India. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, the show for all things Indian fintech. I'm your host, Elroy.
And I'm your host, Hemant. India's e commerce sector stands ninth in the global cross border growth today and will only continue to accelerate as Indian companies sell to the world. But how can fintech help us in this transformation? To help us demystify the world of cross border e commerce payments acceptance, we have with us today Reeju Datta, co founder of Cashfree. Welcome to India Fintech Diaries, Reeju.
Thanks, Elroy Hemant, for having me. Good to be here.
Reeju, to begin with, could you help our listeners understand your background and how you came to found Cashfree?
Yeah, so I did not have a payments background. Both of us, me and Akash, my co-founder, did not have a payments background. We both came from e-commerce background when we started off. So I'm an engineer. I went to IIT Kharagpur. I graduated in 2013. It's been a long time. And then I was working at a consulting company in Gurgaon, and then I went into e-commerce at an e-commerce startup in Gurgaon again. And that's when we got talking. Right, tried a couple of things before Cashfree as well in the field of real estate. That didn't quite scale and was pretty ops heavy. And then finally we felt that even back in 2015, the volume of COD payments, or the share of COD payments, cash on delivery payments,
Right.
that existed was way too high, right? It was around 70
Correct.
75% back then. So we thought, what could be done differently, to bring this down, and hence our name is Cash Free. We started off trying to solve cash on delivery payments for cash on delivery orders in e-commerce. And the idea was, when you arrive at the doorstep as a delivery boy, you're able to pay digitally at the point of delivery, right? So that's where we started. We would give a link to the user, and then they would make a payment. That was the initial idea, right? And then we thought that NFC phones would come about much sooner, and people could just tap their phones with the delivery boys phones, and the payment would happen. I mean, that's the I guess the idea on which we quit our jobs. And I guess it's still too early for that to
Yeah,
happen.
but
uh,
we're getting there.
yeah, we're getting there, right? Finally, I think it's taken 10 years, but yeah. But yeah, I think so. And then we evolved around the way and figured out way around payments. Right, we started off with night delivery restaurants initially. That was the niche that we had. And then from there we really expanded, and then found other markets that suited us.
And as you said 2013 long back, you are making us sound very, very old. If 2013 is long back, then I don't know what 2008 or 6 would sound like. So thank you for making us feel so old on a weekend.
Yep.
So, Riju, in 2023, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry estimated that our e-commerce exports from India accounts for estimated $4 to $5 billion, and is expected to increase to about like 200, 300 billion by 2030. Now, this industry itself is a very, very fast-growing industry. So, can you help our listeners understand the cross-border e-commerce landscape and what are the factors which are responsible for driving this growth?
Yeah, so I think there is both goods that we see in e-commerce as well as services, right? So
Correct.
traditionally, you have
Hmm.
developers also which provide services, which list on let's say websites like Fiverr,
Yeah.
Freelancer, and so on, right? So yeah, there's both goods and services. And I think, yeah, the idea is for Indian freelancers, Indian e-commerce companies to sell globally. I mean, we do get asked as a domestic payment aggregator also, right, about businesses that want to expand now, right? All bunch of the large e-commerce companies we'll see have started going abroad, right? Especially, and we've seen them launching in the Middle East. Many of them have offices now in the Middle East. Right, so the idea is all the Indians are going globally. Indian freelancers also want to sell globally, and that's where the cross border trade angle comes in, right? And domestically also, you will see at least 3 to 5% of the payments that a domestic merchant processes are from international cards or international
Right.
instruments. right? So even for domestic use cases, let's say you're maybe a food delivery service in India, or someone which is just delivering within India, you still get 3 to 5% of payments that are from an international instrument. And now you have these entities trying to find new markets across the board, and yeah, that's where the growth is maybe coming from. And as an economy, I think both the government and most of us would probably be aligned, that exports are pretty key, to growing in the direction we want to.
Understood. Understood. And what do you, Riju, see the challenges that Indian companies which are doing this facing with payments acceptance when they're expanding beyond the Indian borders?
Yeah, so largely, I think it is much easier if you set up a business company in the local country, right? So,
Correct.
so that's probably the challenge. How do you kind of sell without having to do that? I think that's where that's usually the decision. If you want to, let's say, achieve a certain amount of scale, maybe it makes sense to go in there and set up shop. But before that, to test the waters, I think the idea is you want to be able to accept payments, or, offer the local payment methods for every country that is there, right? Today you have platforms like Shopify and others, right, which make it very easy to sell across borders, right? So the basic infrastructure today is there, that you need maybe to sell across the world, right, globally. And payments also, I think now we have warmed up, right now I think it is possible to offer the local payment methods, across the globe. And as an e-commerce entity, you can accept payments in like multiple currencies, right? And in like we offer maybe 90 currencies, right? And then you can accept payments from various countries across the globe. So that is there, I think, without even setting up an entity in the local country, I think you can start accepting payments and start shipping your orders across the board, as long as some element of trust is established, right? So yeah, that's where we are. The challenges maybe still remain a bit around the commercials, the speed of settlement of payments, some of the regulations, but largely I think it is possible for an Indian exporter or an Indian e-commerce company to collect payments from across the globe.
Reju, in October 2023, RBI issued a circular that brought all entities that facilitate cross border payment transactions for both import and export of goods and services under the direct regulation of the RBI to the creation of a new class of entities called Payment Aggregator Cross Border, PACB. Can you help our listeners understand what a PACB is and what are the different categories of a PACB and what role does it play in the overall ecosystem?
Yeah, so just like you have when you're processing payments within India, you have a payment aggregator,
Right,
right, which let's say collects payments from the user or the payer, and then it settles it to the collecting business, which we call the merchant. Right, so the money typically flows from the account of the user, the buyer, to the account of the payment aggregator, and then finally the payment aggregator settles it to the merchant. And
right,
the payment aggregator is responsible for ensuring that the merchant is legitimate, right? Making sure the proper due diligence is there, making sure the payments are going for the intended purpose that the merchant is purporting it to be, and the interests of the customers are largely safeguarded, right? It helps the merchant process refunds as well, right? And it helps the merchant run the business right, smoothly. For the merchant, I think you make all the payment methods available with a simpler integration, process refunds, handle disputes, and so on. So it's the same logic for a cross-border transaction as well. In So there are two kinds of payment aggregators in cross-border space. One is for import and one is for export. So both need separate kind of licensing and approval, like
right.
explicitly it's either an export or an import approval. So we've got both. I think as of today we are probably the only one who's got both. And yeah, so how an export one would work is, you are a merchant in India typically, and you want to accept payments from various countries outside of India. You would be collecting payments from a business, or let's say if you're running a website, it would be an individual. So the idea would be to offer payment methods that are locally relevant,
Right,
starting even with cards and PayPal, and taking it ahead to local payment methods. Like in Europe, you would have SEPA, ACH in the US, right, and then so on.
right.
Right, so that would be the idea. And you would ideally want it to be available on a payment link, or on hosted checkout, or something that is there on the invoice as well. So that's how a typical export payment would look like. And yeah, so the role of the payment aggregator again would be to aggregate these funds from these local payment methods, right, and make sure it is made available to the merchant, and the merchant is able to offer all the payment methods with a simpler single integration, which is compliant with all the guidelines that the RBI has laid out for a cross-border transaction, right, and the aspects of taxation, FEMA, right,
Right.
are taken care of, right, and that this is done by the payment aggregator, right. So yeah, that's the idea. And on the other side, flip side, we have imports where money is going out. So typically, it is an Indian consumer who is probably buying from a foreign website. Let's say you have a foreign brand that wants to sell in
Yeah.
India, right? So that is typically the use case. And let's say you want to buy from foreign store of Amazon, right? Not Amazon India, right? Then Amazon probably would want to employ a foreign PACB India, an Indian PACB import in the flow. And an extension of this is that we see is maybe other PAs, because I mean it might always be not very easy for every global brand to tie up with a
Yeah.
domestic PA in India. As an extension, it's usually the foreign payment aggregator that is tying up with with a domestic payment aggregator to facilitate the flow. That scales just much faster, and it is allowed specifically in the guidelines, right? Which is, I think, a very, I would say, I guess reflects a very deep understanding of how things move, right, within the regulator, right. So I think that's pretty welcome, and it's usually PAs connecting with other PAs, and typical use cases. Let's say you want a global brand to enable them to offer UPI, right, for Indian customers and access the Indian market, right. That's the basic use case.
Riju, as you said, Cashfree has got both the PACB import and export license, and plus Cashfree was the first, I think, the first firms to get a PACB license. So we just wanted to understand what all is involved in getting a PACB license. What are the requirements? And in your opinion, what are the things the regulator is considering while granting a PACB license to someone?
Right. So I think, yeah, it's a lengthy step. I think a lot of it is articulated on the RBI website. It starts off with the bare minimum things like the net worth criteria,
Hmm.
right,
Right.
and the fit and proper criteria of the directors. Typically, it's easier if you have got the PA. You're involved in the PA domestic space, because a lot of the things get ticked off. Things like how is your onboarding policies, how is your ability to implement them, how do you address customer grievances, so all of these are checked. How is your fund movement, right, how is your handling of money laundering, terrorist financing, preventive checks, right. So how is your AML setup, so that would be there, right. So those are, I think, the core cases, and then there is a lengthy one, this is the baseline technology recommendations, as RBI said, right, which is pretty extensive, where let's say things like a PCI is pretty basic, and then you have other things that come in. So right, so yeah, I think security assessment reports. So it's a very lengthy, I guess it's a long checklist of things that we need to do, and it's easier if you are a domestic PA, I would say, right, yeah. So that's it.
Understood. Understood. And plus, I think then, Riju, it's a testament to the fact that all the mandatory processes, technology provisions which are required to protect the customer are so much in place at Cashfree, even as a PA, that it became slightly easier. And then Cashfree became the first company to get the license. So, congratulations on that. And Riju, if you could help us understand your plans now, how do you plan to leverage the PACB license? What's the things on the annual or the launch sequence as far as products are concerned?
Right. Yeah. So I think there are two aspects. There's the import and the export aspect. So we're working on both. Within imports, we want to enable payment aggregators outside and large brands outside selling both goods, digital goods, and services to accept, let's say, UPI payments and domestic payments, right, and make sure they go through seamlessly. And it's important, right, why something like even a card is important is probably because cross border, like the foreign settings of a card would usually be disabled by default, right. So if you, let's say,
Correct.
are a
Right.
foreign company, chances are the payment might still be failing, right. So it's important that you have a PACB import, right? And it really would, show better results in terms of, acceptance rates, and so on. Right. It's about enabling domestic, not domestic, sorry, foreign companies coming via foreign payment aggregators, and those that come directly, to accept local payment methods, right, from UPI, RuPay, Visa, Master, also net banking, wallets, right? So that's one side of it, right? So which is consumers paying foreign businesses. There's a bunch of B2B payments also happening in imports. The workflows are slightly different, but let's say Indian importers is trying to import from foreign businesses. So that is also there. We've seen demand for that as well. And then on the export side, it is largely Indian companies, largely services, I would say, and then goods as well, are
Okay.
trying to sell, export and sell globally and offer payment methods, from cards, ACH, right, SEPA, and then so on, right. So those are the big geographies. Canada, Australia also coming up, right, but largely US, Europe, UK, right. Those would be the top geographies, I would say, right. And yeah, I think, and multiple industries are there, I think. Uh, E-commerce, goods, pharma is something that is interesting, and we see, come up more than we expected. And yeah, so those requests keep coming in, right, and the idea is to grow. And then we have the local Indian businesses, right, which
Yeah.
want to accept international cards. So that's technically not PSEB export, but that is also something that, we keep, that's also growing, right, which is foreign card acceptance, in for businesses that, offer services locally only, right. Let's say e-commerce company delivering within India, or a food delivery service, delivering within India, right. So that's the plan, to grow both exports and imports, actually. Yeah.
Sounds exciting, Riju. Riju, also the cross-border space, if you look at it, has always been at the cutting edge of fintech, as firms try to make money movement across borders very fast, secure, and cheap. So, what are some of the innovations that you have seen in the cross-border space and in the larger digital payment space? And you can also talk to us a little bit about what Cashfree is doing in terms of innovation in that space as well.
So we've been working for the last, I would say, 3-4 years. I think we were part of the regulatory sandbox when it came out. Also, I think, right, around 3 years back,
Right.
right, and that was largely around digitizing LRS payments, liberalized remittance scheme. Right, we did some work there. I think there are certain things we still want to do there and bring it out. I think some discussions with the regulator also happening. So there, I think, for instance, there was the concept of the digital A2 form. We might
Yeah.
see it, I think that came out as a guideline very recently, I think. But I think, yeah, we started doing that, three years back, right, during that, cohort of cross border sandbox, right. So that is one thing. Then I think a lot of, right, innovation, as we are saying, right, along around the PACB import, where how do you work with another PA to make sure the payments actually happen. There are workflows for B2B companies that we are working on, even for imports. How do you handle things like filing of the taxes, making sure the
Right.
limits of LRS, if applicable, get hit. So basically, I would, broadly, I would say, a lot of work on the compliances and the documentation. And digital
Sure.
A2 is an example, that has maybe already happened. Also, how do we enable, let's say, businesses in India sell globally, and accept local payment methods, without necessarily having to set up shop, right? So something like a payment orchestrator, right, that keeps coming. And then largely, I think, vertical specific workflows, right? That's something
Yeah.
maybe we have seen a few cool companies, doing that in fintech as well, that we keep talking to. Right. So those are some of the spaces specifically for cross-border. Largely, anything that reduces the cost, which PACB does to a large extent, because you're able
Sure.
to aggregate the payments, versus one. And then a lot of on the, compliance workflows, right.
And Riju, what about the domestic side of things? You have a very large portfolio as far as domestic is concerned as well. Can you also tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so domestic, I think a lot of work for us is happening. So we've launched Flowwise, which is our payment orchestrator. So the idea, what we are seeing is, once businesses cross the, let's say, 1 crore kind of a mark
Right.
annual, right? They want to have multiple payment aggregators, right? They don't, and then you want something unified that helps manages 2 3 4 aggregators, and centralizes the workflow around refunds, disputes, right? Because all aggregators may not have same level of handling of disputes, or chargebacks, or refund
Correct.
management, right? For instance, is your dispute handling completely automated, right? Like let's say someone provides us an invoice, right? Can the payment aggregator read your invoice automatically? Can they ensure that no disputes escalate when they should not, right? That's just an example, right? This
Yeah.
is on things like, let's say, managing the success rate, improving the conversions, and then so on, which anyways you have to do, right? You have to make sure the checkout is as optimized as possible, right? The customer is shown the right payment method based on their payment history, right? Like if someone is paying UPI on a high value, on a low value transactions, versus show up EMI on a high value transaction of the particular bank that they have a card of. So those kind of optimizations help in improving the checkout experience, which again we work on through our orchestrator and checkout products, right? So that is something that is I would say pretty exciting. Again, embedded payments, right, wherein
Right.
you have multiple products that want to embed payments as a feature, right? And now you have to do it in a regulated manner. You can't cut corners, right? So that's something that is we are seeing, we're very excited about, I would say. And we have put in a lot of investment in embedded payments. Yeah, so I think those would be a couple of ideas that we are seeing. Bill payments, again, I think it's growing. A lot of changes in regulations have happened there. So I think how that evolves in terms of bill payments, credit card bill payments, is something that we will see. And I think a risk that is associated with payments, I think that's also because I think you'll appreciate, right? Like, because we have
Yeah.
fraud, which is a very, I think it's the topic of every discussion now.
Correct.
And then you have AI, which is, which kinds of gives you unique abilities to solve fraud, right? And then you have regulations which are coming, and I mean, RBI is directly telling people to use regulated entities to use AI, machine learning, to both for fraud detection and for underwriting, right? So yeah, so I mean that seems like an interesting space to be, and I think we are kind of working with a lot of fintechs to solve for prevent fraud that is around payments, right?
Right.
uh, Detect, let's say, account takeovers, detect mule accounts, detect fraudulent anomalous patterns, identify users which are more prone to acting bad,
Right.
versus users that are more prone to acting good, right? So good scores, bad scores, right? Kind of like alternate Sybil, right? Those kind of things. So yeah, so a lot of exciting spaces, things that are happening, I would say.
Reeju, were you at Global Fintech Festival by any chance this year?
Yeah, Cashfree was, yeah, I think, yeah, and I think, yeah, I think it seemed like a lot of identity solutions, a lot of workflow related solutions were there. This is what I hear.
Anything that specifically caught your eye at the festival?
Yeah, so I think that was the thing, right? I think a lot of fraud and risk solutions is I think what is what the thing, and I
Yep.
think the scale of it, right? It just I think it's a massive scale. I think that was there.
Thanks a ton for joining us today. It was like pleasure having you. It was great learning on the cross-border payments acceptance space as well. So, Riju, in case our listeners want to know more about this product offering that Cashfree has, or even the traditional offering, the older offerings that you have, what is the best way to reach out to you or Cashfree?
Yeah, I can be reached over LinkedIn, or you can go to the website and sign up on contact sales, and we'll reach out to you.
Thanks a ton, Reeju, for those details. We'll add those in our show notes. Thanks once again for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot, guys.
That's it from India FinTech Diaries this week. Do log on to our website indiafintechdiaries.com for show notes and other exclusive content. Until next time, stay safe.